Cheri Clay was a mirage. She projected an image of success: designer suits, perfect hair, a gleaming smile. She sold million-dollar homes like they were lottery tickets. Her clients trusted her implicitly. They saw a woman who had it all. They envied her effortless grace. They never suspected the truth. Beneath the polished exterior, Cheri's life was crumbling. She woke each morning with a knot in her stomach. The fear was a constant companion. She plastered on a smile for her clients. She pretended everything was fine, but the pretense was wearing thin. The cracks were starting to show. She felt like a house of cards in a hurricane. One wrong move, and everything would collapse. The pressure was relentless. She had to maintain the illusion of success, for her clients, for her colleagues, for herself, but most importantly, for her son. Ethan was her reason for breathing. He was the only thing that mattered, and he was sick, very sick. The medical bills were piling up. They were suffocating her. She couldn't let him down. She had to keep selling. She had to keep earning. She had to keep up the charade, no matter the cost. The weight of the world rested on her shoulders. She felt like she was drowning in quicksand. Every struggle only pulled her deeper. She was desperate for a lifeline, but there was no one to save her. The office buzzed with activity. Phones rang incessantly. Agents rushed from meeting to meeting. The air crackled with nervous energy. But today, something was different. A palpable tension hung in the air. Whispers circulated like wildfire. Something had happened. Something terrible. Cheri walked through the office, her heart pounding in her chest. She could feel the stares, the hushed tones, the sideways glances. She tried to ignore them. She tried to focus on her work, but the whispers followed her. They clung to her like cobwebs. They suffocated her. The sirens wailed in the distance. They grew louder, closer. They pierced the silence of the office. Everyone stopped. They held their breath, waiting. The siren stopped outside the building. The doors burst open. 2 police officers strode in. Their faces were grim. Their eyes scanned the room. They were looking for someone. Cheri felt a cold dread wash over her. She knew what had happened. She knew who they were looking for. And she knew that her life was about to change forever. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. She felt like she was falling into an abyss. There was no escape. The morning had started like any other. Cheri woke before dawn. She made coffee. She packed Ethan's lunch. She got him ready for school. She kissed him goodbye. She promised him she'd be home early, a promise she knew she might not be able to keep. She drove to work, her mind racing. She replayed the events of the previous day, the argument with Marla, the heated words, the accusations, the betrayal. She gripped the steering wheel tighter. Her knuckles turned white. She couldn't shake the feeling that something bad was going to happen. She arrived at the office, forcing a smile. She greeted her colleagues. She pretended everything was normal, but inside she was screaming. She was drowning in a sea of despair. She couldn't keep up the charade any longer. The mask was slipping. The phone rang. It was the school nurse. Ethan was sick. He needed to come home. Cheri's heart sank. She knew she couldn't leave work. Not now. Not with everything that was happening. She made a quick decision. A decision she would later regret. She asked the nurse to keep him at school. She promised she'd pick him up later. A promise she knew she might not be able to keep. The financial strain was crippling. The medical bills were piling up. Cheri's savings were dwindling. She had borrowed money from friends and family. She had maxed out her credit cards. She was drowning in debt. There seemed to be no way out. Her husband, David, had disappeared 6 months ago. He had taken their life savings with him. He had left her with nothing but a mountain of debt and a sick child. She had tried to find him. She had hired a private investigator, but he had vanished without a trace. She felt abandoned, betrayed, alone. She had to be strong for Ethan. She had to provide for him. She had to keep a roof over their heads. She had to keep him alive. The pressure was immense. It was crushing her. She worked tirelessly. She took on extra clients. She worked late into the night. She sacrificed everything for her son. She was exhausted, physically and emotionally drained, but she couldn't give up. She couldn't let Ethan down. He was her everything. Marla had been Cheri's closest friend at the office. They had confided in each other. They had shared their secrets. They had supported each other through thick and thin. Or so Cheri had thought. Marla had betrayed her. She had stolen a lucrative client from her. A client that Cheri desperately needed. A client that could have saved her from financial ruin. Cheri had confronted her. She had demanded an explanation. But Marla had denied everything. She had lied to her face. The argument had escalated. Voices had been raised. Accusations had been hurled. In a fit of rage, Cheri had pushed Marla. She had pushed her harder than she intended. Marla had stumbled backward. She had hit her head on the corner of a desk. She had fallen to the floor, silent, still. Cheri had stared at her, her heart pounding in her chest, her mind racing. She couldn't believe what had happened. She hadn't meant to hurt her. It had been an accident, a terrible, tragic accident. Panic seized Cheri. She knelt beside Marla's lifeless body. Her hands trembled. She checked for a pulse. Nothing. She was gone. Cheri's world crumbled around her. She didn't know what to do. She couldn't think straight. She looked around the office. It was empty. Everyone had gone home for the day. She was alone, with a dead body. A wave of nausea washed over her. She felt like she was going to faint. She had to get out of there. She had to cover her tracks. She dragged Marla's body to the storage room. She hid it behind a stack of boxes. She cleaned up the blood. She wiped down the desk. She disposed of the evidence. She made it look like Marla had never been there. She left the office, her legs shaking. She drove home in a daze. She couldn't believe what she had done. She had killed someone. Even if it was an accident, she was a murderer. The next day, the police arrived at the office. They questioned everyone. They searched the premises. They found nothing. Cheri maintained her composure. She lied to the police. She said she hadn't seen Marla. She pretended she knew nothing about her disappearance. She continued her work. She sold houses. She met with clients. She pretended everything was normal. But inside, she was dying. The guilt gnawed at her. The fear consumed her. She couldn't sleep. She couldn't eat. She couldn't function. She jumped at every noise. She flinched at every touch. She saw Marla's face everywhere she looked. She was haunted by the memory of what she had done. She was living a nightmare from which there was no escape. Weeks turned into months. The police investigation continued, but they had no leads, no suspects, no motive. The case grew cold. Cheri began to relax. The fear subsided. The guilt lingered, but she learned to live with it. She focused on Ethan. She devoted all her energy to him. He was her reason for living. He was the only thing that mattered. She would do anything for him, anything to protect him. She started to rebuild her life. She started to heal. She found a new sense of purpose. She was determined to make a fresh start, to create a better life for herself and Ethan, a life free from secrets and lies, a life filled with hope and happiness. But the shadow of doubt lingered. The memory of that fateful day haunted her. She wondered if she had really pushed Marla accidentally, or had she subconsciously wanted her gone? Had she been driven by jealousy, by rage, by desperation? The questions plagued her. They kept her awake at night. They whispered in her ear. They chipped away at her fragile peace. She would never know the truth. She would never know if it was an accident or a deliberate act. She would have to live with the uncertainty for the rest of her life. The relief she felt was tainted with guilt, the guilt of taking a life, even if it was unintentional, the guilt of living a lie, the guilt of knowing that she had gotten away with murder. The shadow of doubt would always be there, a constant reminder of the dark secret she carried within her, a secret that threatened to consume her, a secret that could destroy everything she had worked so hard to rebuild.